The Ash Archive. Chapter 1. The receipt was still damp when Leona Rusk laid it on the diner counter. "Tell me why my brother bought a file request from a building that burned 6 years ago," she said. Jonah Vale looked down at the paper between the coffee cups and saw at once why she had come to him instead of the police. Municipal Archive Annex. Basement desk. Processing fee received. The date stamp was yesterday. The annex had taken an electrical fire in late autumn and been condemned before the ash cooled. City storage moved elsewhere. Officially, nothing had entered or left the place since. Unofficially was where Jonah made rent. Rain slid down the diner's front window in crooked lines. Outside, the streetlights along Mercer Avenue made the wet pavement look lacquered black. Leona stood in her postal jacket with both hands braced against the counter, as if she needed the formality of posture to stay upright. "Where's your brother now?" Jonah asked. "Morgue." He looked up. "Car went into the flood channel at 2 a.m, she said. "Single vehicle. They say he was drunk. Theo didn't drink enough to drown politely." Jonah folded the receipt once, then flattened it again. The paper smelled wrong. Not smoke, not mildew, cold copier toner, and something older beneath it, like cardboard stored too long in wet stone. "Did he work for records?" he asked. "Transit maintenance." Leona slid a keyring onto the counter beside the receipt. This was in his pocket too. One brass key, one city tag stamped A12. Jonah recognized the tag shape before the number. Municipal locks. Archive inventory issue. The old kind before the city outsourced its badges and started pretending history could be formatted. "You want me to find out what he was doing there? I want you to tell me if somebody killed him because he found something that wanted staying lost." She said it without drama. That helped. Jonah had once worked official investigations out of the Claims Bureau until a case involving missing eviction files taught him the city preferred deniability to closure. Since then, he handled smaller matters for people who knew the difference between weird and impossible. Water damage that returned signatures to old leases. Insurance photos showing extra figures in condemned rooms. Dead phones receiving voicemail from disconnected extensions. Most of it reduced, in the end, to forgery, panic, or bureaucracy with theatrical timing. Most of it. "You go to the police with the receipt?" he asked. "They told me Theo probably scavenged it from a souvenir pile." Leona's mouth tightened. "Then one of them asked where I'd heard your name." Jonah slipped the key and receipt into his coat. That's never a good sign. The annex stood 3 blocks from the river, behind a chain-link fence and a city unsafe placard, so faded it looked tired of warning people. Rain had thinned to mist by the time Jonah parked in the alley. The building rose 4 stories of soot-streaked brick, with boarded lower windows, and one cracked floodlight still burning above the delivery entrance, like a habit no one had remembered to cancel. A12 opened the side service door. That was the first bad fact. The second was the smell inside. Wet plaster, ash, old paper, and fresh coffee. Someone had been using the place. Jonah shut the door softly behind him and listened. Water ticking through pipes, a loose sheet of metal shifting somewhere high in the dark. From deeper in the building came the faint dry chatter of a radio failing to hold a station. His flashlight found hand trucks, collapsed shelving, and blackened archive cartons stacked against the walls in orderly rows that no fire had arranged. On the concrete floor, a trail of recent footprints led toward the basement stairs. Mud over ash. One set heavy, work boots. One lighter, narrow heel. Theo had not come here alone. The stairs descended into a records intake room, where half the ceiling had fallen, but the central desk remained intact under a tarp. Jonah pulled it back and found a ledger book, a date stamp, 2 dry pens, and a receipt pad with yesterday's top copy torn out. He touched the stamp. Clean ink on the rubber. Used within hours. On the wall behind the desk, A directory map had blistered from heat. Basement processing. Intake window. Restricted ash storage. Restricted ash storage was not a phrase the city should ever have invented. Jonah opened the ledger. Yesterday's entry sat alone on the page. Requester, Theodore Rusk. Requested file, Astor, Mercy Street, confession box. Disposition, hold at threshold. There was no clerk's signature beneath it, only a line of smeared black, as if someone had signed with a wet thumb. Mercy Street was an old name for the river district, before rezoning and condo glass scrubbed the map clean. Jonah knew it because his mother had lived there until the clearance year, when half the tenants discovered their leases had evaporated in a clerical flood. He turned the page. Several older entries had been torn out, but the pressure marks remained in the paper. He angled his flashlight across them and read fragments. Rusk, Elena, Box 12, return not advised. Elena Rusk was his mother. Jonah shut the ledger slowly. The radio chatter sharpened somewhere beyond the intake room. Not music. Voice, thinned by static and distance. He followed it through a corridor lined with wire cages until he reached a half-open storage room whose sign had melted into unreadable curls. Inside, metal shelves held evidence bags, file boxes, and labeled jars of grey ash sealed with wax. Each label carried an address and a date. The city had catalogued burn remains from condemned properties, the way other institutions catalogued bone fragments. At the center of the room sat an old desktop radio, wired by hand to a reel-to-reel recorder. The tape spun without moving. Jonah approached carefully. The speaker hissed, then formed words. "If you're Vale, shut the door." He did. The voice did not sound theatrical, only tired. Male. Older than him. Familiar in the unpleasant way some places are familiar before memory agrees. "Who is this?" Jonah asked. The tape reels kept turning, though the supply spindle was empty. "You already know where the file points," the voice said. Theo opened the wrong box. Jonah looked around the room. "Where are you?" "Not available for an interview." The answer might have been funny anywhere else. Here, it felt procedural. "What is the confession box?" Jonah asked. Static scraped across the speaker. Then, Mercy Street held the records the city couldn't legalize. Evictions, payouts, death revisions. When the annex fire started, some files burned and some remembered. Jonah kept his breathing even. Evidence first. Objects, contradictions, sequence. That rule had kept him solvent and mostly sane. "Why did Theo die?" he asked. "Because he tried to take proof upstairs." From the hallway behind him came the unmistakable sound of a door closing. Jonah turned. No one visible, only the long corridor and the cages, and the wet footprints drying into the floor. When he looked back, the radio had gone quiet. On the table beside it lay a city archive request slip, already filled out in black ink. Requester, Jonah Vale. Requested file, Elena Rusk, relocation confession. Fee received. Signature on pickup, Jonah Vale. He picked up the slip and felt the last of the room's ordinary temperature leave him. The signature at the bottom was his. Not similar, not suggestive. His exact compact slant, the one he used when signing claim releases, because speed mattered more than beauty. He had not written it. Under the slip sat a second page, thinner and older. A carbon copy receipt, dated 19 years earlier. The requester on that one was Elena Rusk. In the notes field, she had written a message that now looks less like paperwork than a hand reaching forward through bad storage. "If my son comes looking, do not let the city tell him I left alone."